Hi, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. I'm recording this for July 5th, Friday, July 5th, my Friday Reads update. So I've finished several books. I've got a few new pickups, some finds from the little free library, stuff I'm sending back or sent back to the little free library. So lots of busyness today. First of all, I finished an ebook, a reread of an ebook called A Great Idea at the Time, The Rise, Fall, and Curious Afterlife of the Great Books by Alex Beam. And I did a full review of that in another video, and I'll link to that in the description. So I won't spend a lot of time on that one, but it was a good reread. Also, I finished To Kill a Mockingbird, and that I deposited at one of my little free libraries. And it was a good book. I mean, I don't think it's like the greatest book ever written or anything close to that, but it certainly raises awareness about racism in the South. There's a lot of interesting stuff in terms of different classes, social classes, the white trash in Alabama, and the also, there's a sort of a gender feminist angle in there too, which is interesting because Scout, the female protagonist, the child, she's narrating the book. She's today we might call her queer or something along those lines. She's a tomboy, and it's interesting on that level. Her friend who comes visit her in the summers, Dill, apparently was modeled on her actual childhood friend Truman Capote. So that's an interesting angle if you're interested in biographical readings of literature. It's well written. It's definitely like a coming of age type of story where the children, Scout and her older brother, they come into an awareness of the adult world with all its thorns and pain and evilness, to mention a few things, and some good things too. So it's a good view of rural life. Like initially, it kind of reminded me of Tom Sawyer, and but it goes off in its own direction. The character, the father figure, the father in the book, Atticus Finch, the lawyer, he's a wonderful character and very heroic in a lot of ways. You have to be or not be triggered by the use of the N-word. There's epithets, racial epithets, racist epithets throughout the book, more than I anticipated. I can kind of understand why this book may not be taught in schools anymore. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it, but I think it's not. It's probably been canceled. But maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's better books out there on the subject of race that don't have to go there and say that. But that, having said that, I do think it's a worthwhile book. It's definitely achieved classic status in American literature. I can also understand why Harper Lee didn't really write another book after that. That was one of the literary curiosities. Like, she had this huge hit with To Kill a Mockingbird and didn't come out with another one. Like, that was it, one and done, a one-hit wonder. And I having read the book now, I don't presume to know much about her life or why she did or didn't write, but maybe she just had one book in her. Like, that's what happens sometimes with writers. You have that one novel, maybe deriving a lot from your childhood family experiences, and you say what needs to be said, and then that's enough. She just probably lived off the royalties for the rest of her life. I don't even count that book that came out, to Go Set a Watchman, I think it's called, at the very end of her life. She probably wasn't in full command of her faculties at that point, and apparently that's just an early draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, and it got widely panned. I don't think the critical reception was very positive for that one, so I'm not even planning to bother reading that one. But yeah, I'm glad to finally check it off my list. To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm glad I read it, and it has already been sent to the little library. What else? I also finished a book called My Death. I just finished this yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. And this is by Lisa Tuttle. It's in a very attractive NYRB, New York Review of Books Classics edition with a interesting cover art. You get Neil Gaiman to blurb the back here. That's a good sign too. He says Lisa Tuttle is quietly and unsensationally the finest practitioner of unsettling fiction writing today. Her authorial voice is so sensible that it's easy to forget over and over in story after story that she's one of the dangerous ones, the kind of writer that somebody really should have warned you about. And I'll read you this copy on the back here to give you the premise for the book. The narrator of Lisa Tuttle's uncanny novella is a recent widow, a writer adrift. Not only has she lost her husband, but her muse seems to have deserted her altogether. Her agent summons her to Edinburgh to discuss her next book. What will she tell him? At once the answer comes to her. She will write the biography of Helen Ralston, best known, if at all, as the subject of W.E. Logan's much reproduced painting Circe, and the inspiration for his classic children's book Hermione in Cloudland. But Ralston was a novelist and artist in her own right, though her writing is no longer in print, and her most radical painting, My Death, deemed too unsettling, malevolent even, to be shown in public. Over the weeks that follow, Ralston proves an astonishingly cooperative subject, even as her biographer uncovers eerie resonances between the older woman's history and her own. Whose life is she writing, really? So it's an interesting premise. It reminds me of this other book I'm reading by Stephen King, Bag of Bones, both about widowed spouses who are writers and are having a tough time moving on and like they're creatively blocked. But this goes in its own direction. So My Death, very well written, clean prose, precise, drew me in, the voice of the narrator. There's some major spoilers that I can't give away here. I'll just point you towards this last line where they say, whose life is she writing really? And there's some very uncanny things, some very uncanny twists that happen that are hard to explain, that put this book all of a sudden into the realm of magic realism or fantasy or weird fiction, whatever you want to call it. And I like that twist, but the very, very last chapter, like after like the big reveal, confused me a little bit. So if any of you have read this novella and you want to comment on that very last chapter, it seemed to kind of shift back in point of view, and I have to reread it to sort of think through what was really going on there. But I think I'll keep this one for a while. This was a little free library find. I might give it a reread. My wife might be interested in reading it. Eventually it'll probably make its way back to the little free library, but this was a really nice find. And I think you'll get into its themes of sort of the erasure of female artists. That's certainly like a thread that's running through it, and just it's a humane book, but it's also kind of it's got its quirks and oddities, and I generally like that with fiction. So yeah, a lot to chew on with this one, and it's a quick read. It's just a little over 100 pages. So that's My Death. The other book, this is one, sometimes I just fall into reading certain books, nowhere near finishing it. But anyway, I've been trying to purge some books, and I'm having some success with that, giving some stuff away, donating it to the thrift store or the used bookshop that the seniors run in town here. But I have this whole sort of small stack. It's not a complete set, but it's like it's a big, good chunk of these Oxford History of English Literature. And I think the whole set is maybe 12 volumes. And this particular volume I started reading was Chaucer in the 15th century. So I'm about 58 pages into it. And I just read it because I was right on the verge of just like putting these all in a bag and saying, like, I'm not going to ever get around to these. Like, I don't even know why I got them in the first place. There was a really good deal. I think it was a bag sale. And they looked like substantial. They looked like they had some gravitas to them and they might be informative. Well, I started reading it and I was really captivated by it. Like, the book is written by H.S. Bennett. And I don't know who H.S. Bennett is. I probably should know who it is. But if you're interested in literary history, keep an eye out for these, because this is just, I don't know if it gets better than this. I mean, first of all, they're written in the mid-20th century. Let me give you a date. First published 1947, reprinted with corrections in 1948 and 1954. I think people just wrote really well back then, like just through kind of like average prose style. You didn't have to be a great writer, but just like the average level was like much higher than it is today. Like, people knew how to write a sentence, they know how to balance it, they know something about prose rhythm, topic sentences, paragraph development, transitions, the stuff we still try to teach in English composition. It's a very quixotic undertaking, but this is just really just well written. I'll try to quote a passage here. Well, let me just read you the first paragraph from chapter 1, Chaucer and his age. The city of London in the 14th century, despite the fact that it was incomparably the greatest city of the kingdom, was comparatively small, indeed insignificant when compared with the great Wen of today. It was separated from the city of Westminster by a badly paved way, the Strand, on each side of which stood great palaces such as Chester's Inn or the homes of the lawyers, such as the Temple or Lincoln's Inn. The city itself was surrounded by its wall, which ran down to the Thames, and at intervals there stood the gates which gave entrance to the city from various points. Above each of them was the little gatehouse, and in that, at Aldgate, during the years 1374 to 86, Geoffrey Chaucer lived. It was not an imposing apartment. It consisted of one large room with one window looking into the city and another looking outward to the open country. There were also a smaller room and two very small rooms, together with cellars below. I mean, that first paragraph just sort of draws you into the geography of the city, and you notice how he kind of zooms in and he kind of gets you focused into this one gate, Aldgate, where Chaucer lived. And I was hooked, like, it's just kind of really interesting. So not only am I learning something about Chaucer and his time and other writers who lived then, right now I'm reading like the Chaucer-focused chapter, but you learn a lot about the monarchy, you learn a lot about English history, European history and culture. It's an education. I just thought, I'm not getting rid of these books right away. I can't. I'll just have to kind of find a place to tuck them away for the time being, because I will probably finish this book, and we'll see how the other volumes read. They're written by different people. But anyway, Chaucer in the 15th century, like, I'm glad I gave it a chance, because now I'm kind of hooked to it. Anyway, not for everybody, but that's the English major in me. Really like that kind of stuff. I wish people still did that kind of literary history today. It's harder and harder to find that. There are a few out there. All right, let's move on to some new acquisitions. I was at a local Goodwill store and I found 3 books, a lot of books to look at. Here's Neuromancer by William Gibson. Cyberpunk, right? Never read it. I'm ashamed to say. Like, this has become, a classic in science fiction, and I will definitely get around to reading this. It's in good condition, mass market paperback. William Gibson. This one I couldn't resist. Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. You just always would see these, still do see these, but in the back in the day you saw these all the time in the used bookshops and sales. And we'll read you the blurb here. Well, first of all, when was Future Shock published? 1970 was its first printing. So future shock is a disease of change. Its symptoms are already here. Future shock tells what happens to people overwhelmed by too rapid change. Future shock looks at the human side of tomorrow. Brilliantly disturbing, it analyzes the new and dangerous society now emerging and shows how to come to terms with the future. And it's got some quotes here. The BBC says, an important book reaching some startling conclusions. Newsweek says, immensely readable. Atlantic Monthly said, the most prophetic and stimulating social study of the year. And C.P. Snow, if this book is neglected, we shall all be very foolish. So high praise from some bigwigs. And this was very popular. It was a bestseller. I've never read it, but when I was prepping a course last fall, sort of a first year interdisciplinary arts and sciences course, the theme of the course was technology and human nature. And I actually used a little bit of Alvin Toffler's ideas to help me with the research. And I might have even showed the student. I don't think I got around to sharing a video with them, but there were some videos on YouTube about Alvin Toffler, featuring Alvin Toffler, old documentaries. They're a lot of fun to watch. So that's my major exposure to him. But I thought, I've seen this so many times over the course of my life, and I never picked it up. So maybe I'll get to read it now. And what I'm most interested in is now, like, I'm in the future, we're in the future that he was anticipating in 1970. So I want to compare what he was saying and predicting with what has actually come to pass in the last 50 some years. It should be interesting. And then, I'm an old classicist, so I couldn't resist this Hesiod, translated by Richard Lattimore, who was a pretty decent translator from the mid 20th century. This has some nice illustrations in it, and it includes the Works and Days, Theogony, and the Shield of Heracles. And I think I have Works and Days, but I'm not sure I have these other two works by Hesiod. So I thought, let's give this a shot. It's like lightly highlighted, but it just is in good condition. It's a nice hardcover, and I do like illustrated books, so I'm a sucker for that. Nice dust jacket. And yeah, I think it cost 50 cents or $1 or $1.99, something like that. So those were my three Goodwill finds. And then a couple books I found at the little free library in some of my morning walks. As I drop books off, I find new ones. So this one is a Penguin classic, Nikolai Gogol, The Diary of a Madman, The Government Inspector, and Selected Stories. It's a little chewed up, but it's not in awful condition. And what other stories are in here? Gogol is a fine writer. Ivan Fyodorovich Shabanka and his aunt, how Ivan Ivanovich quarreled with Ivan Nikiforovich, Nevsky Prospect, The Nose, The Overcoat, Diary of a Madman, The Carriage, and The Government Inspector. And who is our translator for these? Translated with notes by Ronald Wilkes, with an introduction by Robert A. McGuire. Couldn't pass it up. I've read a few of these stories, especially The Nose and The Overcoat. The Nose was maybe the first Gogol work I read, and The Overcoat. I think I read them in the same course. It was a continental literature course, and that I took as an undergraduate, and in a great anthology, which I want to show one of these days. It's in a magic realism anthology, and yeah, that knocked me out. The nose was just hilarious. Like I never had read something quite like that. And then later, many years later, I read Dead Souls and liked that a lot. So yeah, Penguin Classics, I generally pick them up when they surface. And then this one, John Banville, The Sea. This was a Man Booker Prize winner. It was published in 2005. And somewhere along the line, I added this to my Amazon wish list. I never bought it, and I don't even think it's in the wish list anymore. I'm not sure why I added it to the wish list. I must have read some reviews and got interested in it. It has a really nice cover. Like, I love the cover art and the design. And I just started to read it. I can't say I'm exactly drawn into it yet, but I will give it a chance. It doesn't look like a very long book, so it's probably one where I will give it the benefit of the doubt. Man Booker Prize winning book is probably, okay. So I'll try it out. And then I don't think I'll keep it, but it's a good one to sort of borrow for a while. Still, now that I'm finished with My Death by Lisa Tuttle, I'm getting back into Stephen King, Bag of Bones, but not making a lot of progress right now. There's just other stuff happening. And I've been reading my Plutarch Lives, and that's going well. I think I'm up to now Cato the Elder, or Cato the Younger. I forget which Cato I'm in, but Plutarch is just great. I would like to finish all Plutarch's Lives maybe by the end of the year. We'll see. I think that's achievable. Anyway, that's my update. How's your reading life going these days? Any responses you have to these titles I've shared, I always like to read the comments and respond to you. Hope you like and subscribe, and hope to see you back soon. Thanks.